Cook, Marquette, Ponder, and Walls are very proud of the results they obtain for their clients, but you should know that past results afford no guarantee of future results, that every case is different and must be judged on its own merits, and that the choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. And now, back to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn.
And welcome back for segment 2 of Tell Me I Have a Case. I'm Matt Glenn alongside Dan Grimm. You can find us at www.cbpw-law.com or call us at 573-335-6651. Dan, I forgot to say it in the first segment, man. Welcome back.
Appreciate it. Yeah, the week-long vacation was fantastic. Yeah. We went up to the Boundary Waters up there in Minnesota and did some fishing with some old fraternity brothers of mine. It was a blast. Let me show you something we caught. Is quite pretty fish. It was have you ever caught a walleye before?
I'm not even sure I know what a walleye is.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful fish.
Yeah.
Let's see what I got right here. It's coming up. There it is. Look at that.
Hey,
look
like
at
any
that.
great
Look
radio
at that.
show, look at that.
Look at that. Right. It was massive. But yeah, we had a good time. It was a really good time. Something we plan on doing like once a year.
Once a year.
Yeah.
Well, it must have been cooler up there than it is down here.
Yeah, it was no humidity. Massive mosquitoes, but no humidity.
The office was not the same without you.
Oh, you're too kind.
It's never been better. Anyway, we were in the first segment. We had Greg Rogers on at Golden Rule Insurance Associates talking about uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. The best way, if you are trying to protect what you've created in this world, what you provide for your family, the best way to guarantee that if you're in a car accident, no matter what insurance the other driver has, there's going to be plenty of money for you to go after in a judgment. And I know you've had plenty of examples of this in your life, but tell the folks how like a standard UIM case would work.
Sure. So a standard UIM case, which is underinsured motorist coverage, and we'll take the example that somebody has $25,000 of coverage, the at-fault party that hits you. What we typically see is somebody that has $50,000 in UIM, or say, for the sake of example, $100,000 in UIM. You would exhaust the at-fault party's insurance by your injuries, whether it's injuries, medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, and then you're allowed to then utilize your underinsured motorist coverage of $100,000, which would net you an additional $100,000 in total, or an additional $75,000 because bodily injury is subtracted from your underinsured motorist coverage.
And so if you're hit by one of the 25% of drivers out there who have the minimum coverage, and that number's statewide, my guess is down in southeast Missouri we're looking at a lot higher number. At least then you've got a little bit of extra money to cover those lost wages.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something we talked about all the time is that people really think about all the time, for example, insuring like your house, for example, your assets. People go out of their way to make sure they have proper coverage for their house or their belongings in their house. But as we talked about, the most important asset you have is yourself, your health, and well-being. And this is one of the ways where you're able to really protect yourself rather than relying on somebody that hits you because you have no idea if they're insured and how much they have as far as insurance.
Yeah, and we get a lot of cases where maybe you're hit by one of those people, one of the 16% of people who don't have car insurance, or we see this a lot where people get in a car accident and the other driver leaves.
Right.
What options do your clients have when that happens?
Sure. So it's called a hit and run, or in our business, it's called maybe a phantom motor vehicle. Your uninsured motorist coverage policy protects you in that situation. If you have a hit and run and somebody takes off and the police show up but they're not able to get the license plate or the description of the vehicle and they're not able to track that individual down, you're able to make a report and then go against your own insurance, which is called uninsured motorist coverage, to compensate you for your medical bills, pain and suffering, lost wages. So it's another example of why it's so important to have proper coverage, because that's really the best route to get full and fair compensation.
And that'll cover, if you miss a few months of work, that's going to cover that.
Absolutely.
If you need a special surgery, maybe we have this a lot of cutting-edge surgery, something your health insurance carrier isn't going to cover, but your surgeon wants to do it because it's going to be your best outcome.
Right.
This money can jump in and cover that.
Right. And it's important to realize that, however, what it covers is really how much coverage you pay for. Because a lot of times we have conversations with our clients and say that their medical bills are astronomical, but they only purchased $50,000 in uninsured motorist coverage or underinsured motorist coverage, but their bills are astronomical or the lost wage are astronomical. That's why it's so important to take control, and you can have that $500,000 in coverage or the umbrella policy that covers your uninsured or underinsured motorist policy.
Right, and Greg talked about it for a married couple in their 30s, it being an extra $20, $24 a month or something like that. I mean, that's an estimate, and everybody's situation is going to be different. Greg was clear about that, but it's certainly worth talking to somebody like Greg about, hey, how is it that I protect myself in case this happens and the person on the other side doesn't have the type of insurance I need. One of my favorite cases you had, though, your client wasn't even in a car.
Right.
How did that work?
Right. So the client that I had, went up to a vehicle and she was talking to someone that she knew, and they were making small talk. And then when they're done talking, she starts walking around the backside of the gentleman's vehicle, and he wasn't paying attention, and he ended up backing up over her, causing her horrific injuries, spinal injuries. In that situation, a lot of people think, well, gosh, how does my auto insurance insurance protect me? Well, again, we went after the at-fault party's insurance, exhausted his insurance, but thank goodness that she had a very large underinsured motorist policy that was able to take care of her medical bills, her pain and suffering, loss of quality of life, that actually was able to compensate her, even though she was not in her vehicle herself.
So it applied to her even though her vehicle was 10 miles away, 10 feet. She wasn't using her car
Correct.
At the time.
Correct. Because that insurance is considered a personal insurance. It travels with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it covers you even if you're not in your car.
Correct.
You could be in somebody else's car, but that policy you got, that's still with you.
Correct. And so that's an example as far as if you're a passenger in a vehicle and the at-fault driver hits you, and say they have $25,000 in coverage, and the car that you're in, your friend's vehicle or a neighbor's vehicle, they have underinsured motorist coverage. Same thing in that example. If they have $100,000 in coverage, you can exhaust that layer of insurance, that underinsured motorist coverage. Then also your personal car that you were not in, has underinsured motorist coverage. You can stack that because you were in your vehicle. So there's different ways that you can do this. That really, again, the idea is you want to protect yourself as much as possible. And these policies that you see on these auto insurance policies are a wonderful way to make sure that you're properly and fully covered, not worrying about what the at-fault party has.
You brought a new word into the conversation.
Oh gosh,
you said something. You did. You said stacking.
Stacking.
I'm having flashbacks now to my bar exam because stacking is one of those issues that they test all of us on. Because honestly, it's one of the most important things a lawyer needs to recognize when he has a client in a car accident, and these are some of the most common cases in the world that we deal with. Stacking.
Yes.
I'll put you on the spot. Can you define it?
So stacking is, in this context, what we see most often is with uninsured motorist coverage. So in the state of Missouri, if you have 4 vehicles in your household, the at-fault driver hits you and has no insurance, therefore your uninsured motorist policy kicks in. And let's use an example that you have $100,000 in uninsured motorist coverage. Your household has 4 vehicles. You can stack those other 3 vehicles that had nothing to do in your household with this crash, and stack those policies to the state minimums of $25,000 each, which would net you a total of $175,000.
So you get the $100,000 of uninsured motorist coverage on one vehicle,
the primary vehicle that was in the crash.
Okay,
Correct.
and then you the other 3, you get the state minimums, which in Missouri are $25,000.
Correct.
And you can then basically, by stacking, it really is just adding the coverages to it.
Right. Right, because each one of those vehicles essentially has a premium attached to it.
So if you're somebody about our age, we both have teenagers, and you start to get kids who turn 16, 17, 18 years old, maybe they go off to college, you wind up with 3, 4, sometimes 5 cars in your driveway, all of them insured by the same carrier. Yeah, the stacking is an issue you want to bring to a lawyer if somebody gets seriously injured.
Exactly, because the idea is that when you have these horrific injuries, you're looking for every way possible. You want to turn over every rock to figure out what policies can help compensate your injured loved one. And these are just different ways that we look at. Anytime we have a client come in, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for every possible insurance policy that can help compensate you for what you lost. I mean, that's the idea. And these things do get complicated. And so that's what we specialize in. That's what we do day in, day out. And the idea is to make sure that we don't miss anything.
Yeah, and that's important to realize, because if you're in a car accident that isn't your fault, you're entitled to feel the way you felt the day before that accident. You're entitled to be capable of doing all the things you were capable of doing the day before that accident. And, you know, there isn't always enough coverage initially to make that happen. But that's what we do as lawyers. We look everywhere we can possibly look. We find the coverage that exists that you've paid for, or that someone else has paid for, and that therefore is available to you legally under the law, because it's important that you get back to where you were. Greg talked a little bit about you could bump your coverage up even to up to $1 million, or $10 million. And he talked about umbrella policies. Tell us about an umbrella policy.
Sure. And a lot of times people think about umbrella policies. Again, they think about, I need to protect myself in case I do something where I'm liable. And that is important. But a lot of times they don't realize that the umbrella policy with certain insurance companies can also protect you if you're, again, injured, not at fault. And you can use your umbrella policy to then stack or be in addition to what your uninsured motorist coverage is or underinsured motorist coverage is. For example, if you have $500,000 in underinsured motorist coverage, you can buy an umbrella policy, which Greg was talking about, which is this, a few $100 extra a year for $1 million of additional coverage. And that, again, protects you in the event that your health, you're injured, you're harmed in some way because somebody else is at fault that ran that red light.
Right.
And it's because, again, what we're seeing time and time again, the people that are on the roadways either have no insurance or have state minimums. That way, when you leave the house, you're completely protected. And we talked about, I mean, if you assuming you get your license at the age of 16, the national average shows that you're going to be in a car accident 3 to 4 times or 3.5 times in your lifetime. And this insurance policy is not just one and done, and this insurance policy will cover you time and time again.
Yeah. So if one of those accidents is serious, I think about a lot of our clients are small business owners.
Yes.
And you get a client. Most people think, oh well, if I hurt my back, I can still go sit at a desk, or if my leg's broken, I can still drag myself into my store and monitor what's going on. A lot of the injuries we see are traumatic brain injuries. They're concussions. You're under doctor's orders to be in a dark room with no light stimulus and no stress for up to 6 months or a year. Now, if you're the chief person operating your business, that business can go under during that
Absolutely.
year. And you're going to need that umbrella coverage to go after. You're going to need to go after that $1 million policy because you had a valuable business, and now that's been taken from you.
Right.
The only way to ensure that you can get that back is to have the appropriate amount of coverage.
Right. And you're able to take control of the situation by picking and choosing what policy you want to protect you and your family, as opposed to hoping that the person that hit you has proper coverage. Because we have the conversation all the time where somebody has, terrible injuries, mounted up tons of medical bills, and the reality is that person that hit them only has 25,000 hours of coverage, and they don't. A lot of times, clients just don't understand why isn't there possible to get more, because the reality is that's all that person paid for. That's the reason why this conversation today is so important, is that you can eliminate that concern by making sure that you have proper coverage, and that's by way of uninsured motorist coverage, underinsured motorist coverage, umbrella policies, and even MedPay.
Yeah. And Greg talked about it was less than $40 a month to really bump up that policy. But MedPay, that's another new word. So tell everybody what MedPay is.
Sure. MedPay, or it's called medical payments. It's a policy that you have added to your auto insurance policy, and it's pennies. And the idea is that whatever your medical bills are, you can submit those medical bills to your insurance carrier, your auto insurance carrier, and they'll issue a check back to you for those medical bills, and you can use that medical payments as you see fit. And what's really kind of neat about this is that, for example, I had a client one time. She was in a crash, and she had $1,000 in MedPay, and obviously that was helpful, but she could actually have used more. And I said, hey, well, I would recommend bumping up your MedPay to higher amounts. Well, she took my advice and she bumped up to $25,000. Well, sure enough, a couple of years later, she was in a motor vehicle accident, and again, she had $25,000 of coverage, and not only for her, but all the occupants in her car was able to obtain $25,000 in MedPay for their medical bills. And it's a really great way of it's kind of a stopgap measure, because sometimes you're out of work, you have bills coming in, and that medical pay can really help bridge that gap between when you get back to work, because it's money that gets directly provided to you based on what your policy is.
And you really need a lawyer for those MedPay benefits, because if you don't get an attorney the hospital's going to jump in and grab those MedPay benefits, or somebody else will. They're not entitled to it. You're entitled to it. You're entitled to use it to cover your copays. You've paid for multiple types of insurance. You don't need to, let someone else benefit from what you've purchased.
Don't authorize them to send it to the hospital or the medical provider. Make sure it comes to you directly.
Recommend you call Greg Rogers at Golden Rule Insurance Associates or any other insurance agent. Talk to them about fully taking control of your situation and making sure there's enough out there if you get into a car wreck. This has been Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm. I'm Matt Glenn. You can find us at cbpw-law.com. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn. If you have questions and need answers, contact Cook, Barquette, Ponder, and Wolz today. Just go to cbpw-law.com. See you next week for Tell Me I Have a Case. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and shouldn't be based solely on advertisements.